Grief doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always show up in tears or wails or funerals. And sometimes grief lives quietly, really in the corners of your mind. It sits in your chest when no one is watching. It hums in your nervous system when the world expects you to be fine. And here's the truth. The people we lose, whether to death, distance, or betrayal, they change us forever. You carry them inside of you, not just in memory, but in body, in decision making, in how you love, in how you feel, in how you protect, and how you survive. This is The Forge. My people, man, my people, welcome back. Welcome back to The Forge. I'm Tyler Van Allen, therapist, trauma clinician, and someone who knows that surviving sometimes comes at the cost of quiet pain. Grief is messy, dude. Grief is so messy. It's complicated sometimes, and it can be invisible. You know, it shows up in the way your body tenses, really without reason, right? It shows up in dreams you can't really name. It shows up in the decisions you make, sometimes long after the loss, right? Grief. It's such a hell of an emotion that is so vital to healing and growth. But dude, it has no schedule whatsoever, right? Like, you know, it can leave you alone for weeks and you're like, man, I'm doing great. I'm sleeping better at night, on. And then suddenly, you know, as you're laying there in your bed, right? Like maybe it just shows up at like 2 a.m. Like, hey, bro, you know, that you remember that person you love that just like crushed you? Like, let's think about them for the next 3 hours. And let's just think about them in maybe the worst way possible. Yeah, dude, it just ain't got no rules, man. It's like, you know, it sucks, dude. It's like this crazy ass theme park where all the rides suck and they don't have any good gifts in the gift shop. Like it's going through it can feel that way. But the after effects, right? How we've healed because of that time we've allowed ourselves to grieve. Man, that can be some really good stuff, right? So today we're going deep into that silent grief, right? We're going to explore why it's normal, why neuroscience tells us it's normal, what it tells us about it, and how the people we've lost really continue to shape us, right? Even when they're gone. So, as I've said before, like grief is not really just one thing. You know, it'd be awesome if it was, because then we would just really just know what to expect. But you know, it's not just sadness. It can be anger. It can be relief. It can be guilt, and it can be numbness and a plethora of other things. It can be a flash of laughter that just like stabs your chest, right? It can be on totally opposite ends of a spectrum. Some of it is loud. Some of it is quiet. And if it's quiet, man, it's really easy for the world to miss it. And it's easy for other people to see that you're going through it. For survivors, first responders, really anyone in high pressure roles, silent grief can feel dangerous, bro. It can feel dangerous because showing it kind of feels like weakness. You know, because the work must keep going, because others need you to, quote, hold it together, end quote. And many of us do. You know, we'll carry that in silence with us. But silence doesn't erase grief. You know, it just kind of stores it, and your nervous system holds it in muscle tension, sleep disruption, heightened startled responses, and unexplained anxiety, and even years later, it whispers through your body in so many ways. In so many ways. Yeah, grief, man, it's wild, dude. It's wild because let's just say, for an example, like the grief that you encountered losing your father, right? And then maybe years later, your mom passes and you're like, oh, I know what to expect. And it's like, dude, your whole process could be even so different from your mom. Because we have these different connections to people, right? We have these different connections, what they meant to us, what they gave us, wisdom, knowledge, love, all of those things. And that is what makes grief very much a variable amongst people, individuals. It's not the same from person to person, and it's not the same from person to person that's experiencing it. Folks, if you're enjoying the content so far, keep it locked. Coming very, very soon. It's still in the works, not too much longer to have to wait. The Warrior's Manual is a manual that is being created for you, for me, a tool that sort of lines up with this podcast. It is 3 months, a weekly manual for you to get some grounding tools that actually work and function. There's prompts, there's quotes, things to help you forge a path ahead. It's not a self-help book per se. It's not some cheesy book filled with lots of psychobabble worksheets. Just real stuff for real people who are looking to get to know themselves again, who are looking for a little bit of clarity and ways that they can help themselves and put some of this weight down. So coming soon, our website is currently being built as we speak. The Warrior's Manual will be on Amazon. There's going to be hard copies. It'll be available right through our website. We also have a digital copy. So for me personally, I love the hard copy. There's something about putting pen to paper that really is just very grounding. But for those of you, we have a digital copy that's going to be available. You can pull that right up on your phone, right up on your iPad, on your computer, and you can actually work through it in that sense too. So keep it locked. Definitely we'll have more information to come on the Warrior's Manual. Thanks so much. So let's just get the neuroscience of grief out of the way. I don't want to bore anybody, but again, I feel like this stuff is important, right? And you're going to hear some of the same repeated terms, same repeated brain parts that we've talked about in other episodes. But, so grief is not just emotional. It's neurological, right? So when we lose someone important, again, back to that Amy of our brain, that amygdala, man, she's like detecting threats. She becomes hyperactive as fuck. And yeah, she's just wild, dude. She's going wild, right? And the hippocampus, again, responsible for memory and context, it just becomes flooded with reminders of what's happened, what's happening. And, the prefrontal cortex, which regulates judgment and impulse control, that can become temporarily impaired, right? And this is why grief can feel physically painful. This is why memories can hit like a gut punch, right? That death punch sound. It's why you can cry at a song you've heard 100 times, or you can hear that same song and feel nothing at all. Our brains are literally reshaping in response to this loss. So connections that once anchored us are gone, right? And new neural pathways form in their place. And this is neuroplasticity, right? In real time. Grief rewires who we are. And that rewiring isn't just emotional, it's also behavioral. It affects how we relate, how we trust, how we hold ourselves in the world. The people we've lost leave a permanent imprint on our lives, right? They leave and they live in our choices, our habits, our nervous systems, and even in silence, right? So I feel like that's so important to understand. Again, this is not just a will of your mind. This is your brain is going through some serious changes. And it's trying to grasp, like, what is my new normal here? How many times we heard that, right? When, you've lost someone close and people are like, I'm just trying to figure out, what my new normal is. Yeah, you are. Behaviorally, emotionally, all of that mixed bag of stuff that just feels so strange and uncertain. You guys have heard me talk about my dad before. And, interestingly enough, I can look at pictures of myself before my father passed away. And then I can start looking at pictures like post loss of him. And man, I carry myself different. I smile a little different. It's not always a bad thing. It's just that change, right? I have new interests in my life as a result of that loss. I have new passions in my life. Things that once was so important to me now just don't really mean much. And again, these aren't always good or bad things. They're just kind of things that I think we can expect. So yeah, and I think grief, again, what human on the face of the earth doesn't want to be in control of something, right? I mean, it's just a good, safe feeling. To be able to control things that put us in that state of just feeling safe. But grief, man, you just can't control it, right? Loss, you just can't control. And especially death, that is one thing that people, like, there's no changing it. Like, it is the most final of the final things, right? And I'm not alluding to the fact that when people die, they don't go somewhere. I don't mean that, but like, that change of losing someone physically in your life, that cannot be undone. You couldn't control it if you tried, right? Once it's done, it's done. And to be able to sit with the finality of things, that shakes our brain up, right? That shakes it up big time. So when we kind of talk about the transformation of loss, right? Because loss does change us. It can make us more cautious. It can make us more protective. It can make us more compassionate. It can make us more empathetic, or sometimes harder, colder, and more withdrawn, right, from people in life, right? If I've just lost someone close to me, why in the world would it feel good to get close to other people when this reality is that in this state of grief, man, anybody can be taken away from me at any time. That's scary shit. That is so scary, right? So neurobiology explains some of this. That repeated stress from loss really strengthens certain neural circuits, right? Heightened empathy pathways, protective vigilance, a deepened reflection, and introspection. And, again, back to this internal family systems lens. Again, I'm not a certified IFS therapist yet. I really love the modality of this, and I've learned from my best friend. Exiled parts of us, right? They hold the raw, unprocessed emotions of grief. And the protector parts try to keep you functional and kind of shielded from all of that. And so integration kind of happens, at least the way that I'm kind of understanding it, when you allow both to exist together, right? I'm feeling the loss without letting it immobilize me. And this is how grief becomes more than just mourning. It becomes survival. It becomes wisdom. It becomes a part of your identity that is permanent, but it's useful. It's so useful, right? And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing that it's useful. It's not just this permanent change that we're just like screwed with. Like, it's very useful. It's very, very useful. And so, the thing about grief is, like, I think one thing that a lot of people maybe get wrong is that, first and foremost, you don't have to talk about grief to honor it, right? You do not have to. You don't have to explain it to survive it. You really don't even have to have like much of a super understanding of what it is, because you're kind of learning this grief journey from yourself in real time. So it can be kind of hard to explain, right? So kind of take that pressure off, right? And when we think about practical ways to hold grief, I'm going to get a little woo-woo on you, but it means something, right? There's some easy ways that we overlook, right? And the first one is like journal writing. Write to the person you lost, right? Even if you never send it. Grief is the old tale of grief is just a bunch of love that's got nowhere to go. And you can send it, right? You can send it. Maybe you can't hand that letter to the person you lost, but you can, in spirit, in intention. You can certainly do that. Sometimes I'm just like chilling in my truck and a song comes across the radio and it's one of my dad's favorites. And I'm just kind of like, oh man, Dad, I love you. Thinking about you, right? I'm sending that energy, that love out there into the ether. And that feels so good sometimes. Another way we can hold grief is movement, right? Walk, run, hit the bag, dude, and feel the grief move through your body. Not too long after my dad died, I got into Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And dude, I've wailed on that bag. I've put my anger into that bag. I've put my sadness into that bag. And that's good too, because now I have an outlet. I'm not talking about it. I don't have to talk about it, but I've got to let that energy release somehow, that emotional component release somehow. Another thing, and this one could be honestly an episode in and of itself, is rituals, right? Light a candle, play a song, hold a photo, simple acts to acknowledge presence, right? My grandfather, he had a lot of old tools. And I don't know if anybody's ever had one of those grandfathers that just has a ton of tools, like jack of all trades kind of thing. But I inherited some of his tools after he passed, and they're not the newest, but sometimes if I'm working on something around the house or I'm building like a special project, like I'll use one of those old tools because that helps me feel connected to him. It helps me feel like my future is still holding a part of him, right? And it's that presence. And sometimes I think another way we can hold grief is really by the way that we talk to ourselves, right? Like reminding ourselves, like, I carry you all the time. You are a part of me and I'm still here. And because I'm still here, death is just a journey, but like I'm literally 50% of my dad, right? And I'm still alive and breathing. So he continues to live on in my actions, in my words, in the way that I love people, right? And that's something that he gave me, and I can't ever erase that or take that away, right? Grief is not a problem to solve. It's a process to integrate. I'm going to say that again because that's heavy as shit. Grief is not a problem to solve. It's a process to integrate. It's a process to integrate. And so, we can grieve lots of things, right? You can grieve a marriage that's not working anymore. You can grieve, obviously, death. You can grieve choices that people make. You can grieve losing a job. You can grieve the state of the world, right? Like grief isn't just about death. It's really about the loss of something that kind of anchored you, right? And you don't have that anymore, right? So sometimes I even see this in some sessions where I get parents that come in and let's say their children are growing up and they're making their own decisions. Not a bad thing, especially if those decisions are healthy. But if for so long you've had this idea in your head of what your child will become, and now they have exercised autonomy to make their own choices that don't quite align with what you thought was going to be the plan, you can grieve the hell out of that. You can certainly grieve that. You can grieve the idea of something. that may never come to fruition, right? So grief doesn't really hold a lot of boundaries. It can traverse many different paths and many different, it can come to the surface in many different ways. People of different cultures grieve differently, right? So, for example, Haitians, it's not uncommon for these people to see visions of their loved ones. Like literally, they feel like they're seeing them. And that's not crazy. That's also a cultural component of how they are integrating this process, right? And so, how our culture like kind of believes in death, what the relationship is with death, can really dictate what that grieving process is. And unfortunately, I got to tell you, the United States, man, like this isn't a knock on a country. This is kind of just a knock on societal norms. But our relationship with death, like it freaking sucks, man. Like we could seriously be doing better. I don't know how many of you know this, but if well, we'll start here. So if you think back to like 100 years ago, right? If you ate meat, you likely had to have a very comfortable relationship with death, right? It wasn't something taboo. If you want chicken, you go out into the yard and you get your chicken. If you want beef, you go out into the pasture and you get your beef, right? We don't like to talk about all that kind of stuff, but now, right, we can go into the grocery store and we can get our meat, and we basically have removed ourselves from what has had to happen for us to have that nourishment, right? So that's something that's changed, right? Just in society alone. Not all of us are farmers. Not all of us have had that relationship with death in that way. Something very, very interesting. I'm going to see if I can find this really quick in real time. Have anybody ever given the thought about where the term living room came from, where it first showed up, right? So a living room, most of us have a living room or a living area in our house, right? And so the phrase living room, it really became popular in the early 1900s in the United States, right? So before that, the main gathering place in homes was commonly called the parlor. And so what's really interesting about that is that around the late 19th and early 20th century, there was a cultural shift toward making homes feel more comfortable and family-centered rather than formal, right? So interior designers and home magazines began promoting the term living room to emphasize that the space was for daily life activities, not just formal visits, not just for funerals, right? The parlor. Think of that old term that even at funeral homes, the funeral parlor, right? That term hasn't changed too much. Well, parlors used to be in our homes, right? So parlor, the formal guest space often used for wakes, and the living room now is everyday family life, relaxation, and gathering. And so again, funeral homes eventually took over the role of hosting wakes, which really further helped the parlor fade out of use and the living room becoming more the standard name in American homes, right? But listen, early 19th century, you lost somebody, you were the one that cleaned their body. You were the one that moved their body maybe into the kitchen, and you were the one that, a funeral director and embalmer, they maybe would have come to your house and they would have done that process there in your home, right? So as wild as that sounds to us right now, that process just helped our mind come to an understanding of the finality of what has happened, right? So I get that we all have to grieve differently, right? There's some people, it's like, I don't like to go to open casket funerals because it's just so, it's very it's a lot of discomfort, right? And then there's some of us that really need that. But, even if we think about modern funeral industry and how that has really affected our grieving,